Alright, hey, what's up everybody? Welcome to Comic Book Radio. I'm your host, Peter Cimetti. This is episode 59, and I'm flying solo tonight, so it's just me. But I'm going to put the link in the chat. 20 minutes maybe? Yeah, 20 minutes or so into the show. I think that'll be about enough time for me to kind of hit the ground running with this, and then maybe you guys can share some of your thoughts too. Hopefully. And what is that about? Well, tonight I want to talk about for the unrequited love of comics. Falling in and out of love with comics. I think this is something that maybe all of us here have done. And I don't want to be presumptuous because I don't want to say that you have fallen in and then out and maybe back in again of love with comics. But I think in some way, shape, or form, even if you didn't fully get out of the hobby at some point or get out of creating comics, you probably had days where you were like, yeah, I think maybe today's the day. I've certainly spoken to enough people over the years, creator, reader, whatever it may be, that have had those days where they really kind of felt like, yeah, I should probably move on. But then most of us, it's just a part of us. You can't fully move on, right? Maybe you sidestep a bit. Maybe you take a break. But that siren call of comics comes a beckoning. So before we do get started, I wanted to tell you guys about the fact that I have this up right now. It's a secret perk link for a 5 minutes for art 4x6 book with a front page sketch of any character. I had this on last year's campaign for King Cryptid, but I totally forgot to bring it back for this year. So you know what? I'm just going to have it as a secret perk, and it's just going to be put to the top for every show until we sell out. I've got about 50 or so of these. I got to do an official count up of it. But every single show I'll put this up there until we sell out. It might be 50, it might be 60, something like that. I got to check the storage. I found a whole other box that's full of them. And what I mean is it's these guys. I did this a while back. This was... Man, this was years ago. Does it have the year on here? I don't even know. 2017, 2016, something like that. So, I'll do a sketch for you on the front. A bunch of people got these last year. I think 25 sold. And the whole point of what this book was it's all 5-minute sketches, portrait sketches. And it's just a bunch of different... People were picking characters, their pets, family members, their kids, and just quick portraits. 5-minute portraits. Some people you'll be like, I don't know who this is, and it's probably because when you get this book, you'll realize, oh, it's like someone's grandma. And then other characters, you'll go, oh yeah, I kind of recognize who that is. So this book is on the King Cryptid number 5 to 9 campaign. Secret perk link is pinned to the top. If you want one, get one. Very much appreciate it. Happy to draw whatever character portrait of it that you'd like. What's up, Ara? Hope you're doing well. Thank you for joining tonight. You're awesome too. We got Seer says don't say nothing, but I just got one of those secret perks. Oh, you did. Thank you very much, man. Appreciate it. Can't wait to see what you're picking. I'll get in touch with everybody when the time comes to see what you'd like for me to draw for you. Arnaud, what's up, Arnaud? Hope you're doing well. We got Citizen Ronan here too. Hey, Seer says comics. They don't love us back, do they? Feels like that sometime, right? You know, like a spicy piece of pizza. You know, you may love it, but sometimes it don't love you back. Spicer says, "What's going on, brother? What's going on, Spicer?" Fritzy says, "Cheers, all. Rest in peace, Terry Funk." Yeah, I saw that. Rest in peace, man. Absolutely. Just a backer says this is a great topic. I hope so. I hope it's interesting enough. I hope it can propel the next hour or so with some good conversation. Bretsky, what's up, Bretsky? Hope you're doing well. We got Manny here as well. Hey there. Let's see. Michael says, I am the teapot. Yeah. Bruce Lee. What Geeks Do Network? What's up? Hope you're doing well. We got Mighty Magic here too. Hey. Thank you for joining tonight, Sheldon Martin. Episode 59 already. Yeah, I know. In like 2 months or so, we're probably going to be at, 100? I'm trying to do one just about every single day. Maybe 6 out of 7 days a week for the most part. Generally 4 to 5. Minimum. Minimum 4. 4 is like a slow week at that point. I'm really I'm dedicating myself to this. And like any habit, you got to stick with it for a month. You got to build that in, make it a part of your daily life. You stick with something for about a month or so, and it really starts to get easier and easier, and then you keep doing it. And hopefully it's a good habit, which I think this one is. I enjoy it. I think it's great. What's up, Buddha Bear? Hope you're doing well. Let's see. Mighty Magic says CG got me into comics again. Yeah, there's a lot of different jumping on points over the years for various people. I'm going to talk about my own experiences for the first 20 minutes or so to a half hour, and then I'll put the link in for you guys, and feel free to come on board and share your experiences with me, talk about whatever else is on your mind maybe, or just plain commiserate. What Geeks Do says, move on from Big Two but not comics. Yeah, that's a lot of people too. And some people will have gotten into comics. It's not the Big Two, and then they go into the Big Two, and then they fall out of the Big Two, and but they're still in some capacity reading or creating comics, and that's at least what I find for most people. Blue Teddy, what's up? Thank you for joining us tonight. Beampad, hey. We got Zeno here. He goes, same. I collected mostly Marvel and Image 92 to 2000. CG got me collecting again. We got Spicer. Spicer, does someone say spicy? Yeah, it's a spicy meatball, or maybe even a spicy pizza. What's up? We got Jesus says that book thick. Yeah, it's got like 100 drawings in it. So yeah, go for it. Check it out. Ara says, ooh, I love secret perks. There you go. And shipping is free in the U.S. for that secret perk. But it's like 15 in Canada and 25 outside of that. Outside of Canada, outside the U.S. But in the U.S. it's free. Let's see. Yeah, what's up? Let's see. Spicer says, just took the alternate cap out of the mailbox today. Nice and comfortable. Nice. I'm glad you got it. I'm glad you're happy with it. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Hidden Hand, hey, what's up? Thanks for joining us tonight. Rachel, what's up? Hope you're doing well. Thank you for watching tonight. Jake says, the comics we know always deliver. It's now the ones that have been co-opted that are the heartbreaker. Yeah. I guess I'll say something quickly about that. To just expound upon it a little bit. Now, creative team switch-ups didn't bother me too much when I was reading a lot more comics back in the day. And this, I guess, predominantly revolves around the Big Two. But what bothered me more was when I felt like they did something to the character that even when I was a kid, I could sense that this was a weird thing to do. So, I rode the wave of death of Superman and, breaking Batman's back and pulling the adamantium out of Wolverine and all that kind of stuff. The Clone Saga with Spider-Man, which I think of the 4 I just mentioned, is probably the worst. At least I thought it was the worst. All this stuff, my opinion. I'm not being authoritative or definitive on any of this, so please don't take it as such. So it just a bunch of stuff like that, and then we saw a bunch of different reboots and soft reboots too, and more of that went down. I'd say between the years of 95 to 2000, and then of course New 52 with DC was a pretty a pretty odd reboot. And then Rebirth was even odder. Again, in my own estimation. Every single time something like that happened, I just was like, is this a good time to leave? That's what it felt like. It didn't fill me with like hope for more stories, and I thought this was great. It was a nice big slap in the face to me to let me know just how meaningless all of this was. And I had no preconceived notions of or delusions of grandeur in terms of these comic characters were living and breathing, and they were real. Now the emotion was real. What the stories meant to me was real, and I think a lot of you guys probably can feel the same. I don't want to speak for you, but when I talk to a lot of people, that's basically how they communicate it. But it still felt like, because comics are such a special and different storytelling medium than movies and TV and video games and that kind of thing, especially the serialized nature of comics, not just like the one and done or the graphic novel or whatever it may be, but the thing where it's got 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 something years of history. And even though that history is a little bit bumpy and it sometimes, derails a bit or there's a fork in the road and it goes somewhere else, it all felt like it was part of the fun. And when there was like a big halting, just a stop, screeching at the brakes. I'm sorry, everybody, for that voice and that sound. It felt like this is the place to stop. Maybe it's time for somebody else to come on board, because it felt like this was when the things I knew and loved and cared about and was invested in, they were saying goodbye. And even though that wasn't the intention, the publishers didn't want to lose people, I think, up until, at least I don't remember that ever happening, up until kind of recently in the past 5 to 7 or so years. Where not necessarily the publisher is saying it, but maybe people at the publishing company are saying it, where they're going, maybe you just stop buying our stuff. Which is a very strange strategy. But that's the first time in my comic book buying life where I had ever heard that incorporated into a sales pitch. They're not for you. They're for someone else. That's like a big thing nowadays in general. It's not for you. This is for whoever, the kids, the whatever group, the whatever whoever, not you. I never really heard that pushed around until if I'll be really generous with it in some way, I guess I could even say 10 years maybe. It wasn't popular 10 or so years ago, but I could swear around 2013, 2012, I started hearing a couple creators getting a little weird with that. It wasn't accepted, though, to talk that way. That was strange, like, no, this is for anyone who want. We're making stuff for people, not for certain people. We're just making things for people. And if they like it, they like it. If they don't, they don't. If it's for them, it's for them. If it's not, it's not. But we're not going to actively tell you it's not for you. And I don't remember that happening until, around that time. And then becoming very popular to say that around 2015 or so. And so growing up as a comic fan, I loved just about anything that was in a comic book format. Just loved it. I didn't care what the hell it was. It could have been like a little mini comic that came with a toy or with a Drake cake. It could have been a full-fledged regular comic. It could have been a comic strip in a newspaper. It could have been anytime I saw anything comic book related. You see the word balloons, you see all that, you see the imagery, I was drawn to it immediately. Just loved it. I read it, no matter what it was. I read it. Came across on a cereal box, whatever it was. That kind of storytelling and art form, loved it. And So I got whatever I could get. Now, I didn't have a whole hell of a lot of comics growing up as a kid. I don't think most kids really do, but I started collecting more around, I'd say, like saving up any money I got, probably around 7 years old or so. That was around the time when I learned how to really take care of comics. And you read them, but you still want to take care of them. You still want to make sure that they're good. And I was blessed to get into comics around a really good time. This is probably around what, 91 when I'm 7. Yeah, I'm a youngin' compared to some, and then I'm older compared to others. I'm in the middle, I guess. But I loved a lot of comics that were way before my time, like stuff from the 70s. And that was mostly because of finding a lot of the older comics that were sort of collected. Like, remember those old, like, 4x6, maybe? I guess this is 4x6. Maybe it was a little bit bigger than this. But there were, like, compiled editions of older comics. Whether it was, Spider-Man or Batman, there was a really great book at my library when I was a kid that was full of the Batman comic strips, and one also with the Spider-Man ones too. I love that. But so I got into some of the older stuff through that, and then there was a lot of different trades that my cousin had, and he had an older collection too, and he would let me look through it because he knew I was going to be careful with it. And so I got into a lot of the older stuff that was before my time. And it still felt, though, relatively cohesive. It still felt like sort of, what I was reading in like 91. And, really, really loved a lot of that, the McFarlane Spider-Man and Jim Lee X-Men and all that. I hit it right at that time. And then Image was interesting to me because I don't understand how things work back when I was a kid. I'm thinking like these guys are doing this, but then they'll also be at Marvel too, right? And then when Wizard Magazine came out, and it was more about learning about the business side of it in some roundabout way, that's when I learned about independent comics, even though I was kind of already reading some independent comics because I was already reading things from Dark Horse and Kitchen Sink and Mirage and a bunch of stuff. Because my dad used to get comics where he was at, and they had a lot of indie books at this particular newsstand. And it was in New York City. My mom, where she used to work, there was a convenience store that had more Marvel DC. But he would be able to get a lot of these, the newsstand ones from the indie publishers, a lot cheaper because they weren't selling. So it would be like return day, and my dad would get him half off before they kind of were going to, tear the cover off and all that gory stuff and send it back. So he'd always come home every now and then with like a pile of comics, maybe every like 6 months, like 30 comics of, older stuff, older indie stuff. But so once I got into Wizard and I was learning more about that, I got into the trading card aspect of everything too. I still wasn't like a collector because you're a kid. What are you collecting other than the stuff you have? You're not like seeking out key issues. Even though like I would learn all the key issues because I thought it was so cool to see the history of it. The history meant more to me than the money value. And the trading cards really opened up a whole new world for me. And it got me into more characters. And it got me going to the shop to see the different titles that those characters were in. So all of this stuff as I'm growing up, is a big part of my life. And it meant a whole lot. Now, when Marvel was going under, or at least had filed bankruptcy, because, unbeknownst to me at the time, everything in comics seemed so great in the 90s, but there were so many things, so many missteps that were taken across the board that really put the whole industry pretty much on the brink. And I don't think I'm saying anything new here, but it ruined my hopes of wanting to get into comics professionally because I thought that was it. Comics are over. And that was the first time I experienced some sense of heartbreak within comics. Now around that time as well, it was like a double whammy because as the industry was kind of suffering and going through turmoil, the books they were putting out, even when I was like 10 to 12 years old, I could tell that the quality was really dipping. I could tell that the stories were just not as good. I could tell that the art just wasn't there. It just seemed like something bad was happening. It felt like that. And not for every book, but for a hell of a lot of them. And so many giant events to kind of just trump up the whole thing, and you know, this big weird chest puffery of an event. I mean, the first one that I really clocked out of completely was Onslaught in X-Men. That was that was it for me. And that was something where I felt like, this is weird. Comics are starting to get weird. You know, so I kind of went away from comics for a bit, even though I still loved them and I would still go for back issues and things like that. But shops were going out of business by me, just as they were, I think, a lot of other places too. And it became more difficult to come across comics. And I think a lot of people, because of that, I think a lot of people got out of comics at that point in time too, and never really got back again. Now, of course, there's some people who did, and they got back in again. I eventually got back in again, but then eventually left. I got back in again probably around 2003, something like that, 2002, 2003. You know, I'd pick up a book here and there or something that I might have missed, or a trade. But I got back into buying consistently again and reading consistently again around 2003 or so. And I made the mistake of jumping on board with the Marvel Civil War thing. And how that shook out, I thought it was the dumbest thing in the world. And then so comics kind of broke my heart again with that in terms of, you know, reading. But what Civil War did do for me was kind of really light a fire in me to create, to make stories, because I was so disappointed in that event. Oh, I was so disappointed in that event that I felt like, you know, if this is what comics are like nowadays, I could create my own stories. You know, I was always creating my own stories as a kid. I never wanted to work within the context of my take on Spider-Man, my take on Wolverine, my take on Batman, whatever. I always wanted to work with comics, basically saying, you know, I come up with a character and would love to see this character play off of the other existing characters. Because I always wanted to treat it as if, well, these are individuals who are real within their world. My take would just be to make them consistent the way that I knew them to be. It wouldn't be to change them up, you know, but I would want to inject something new into it with a new character. So obviously by the time I do start making comics, I'm making my own characters and I'm going down that road. Now, when I got to know more of the business side of it, talking to creators out there and whatnot, far and wide, most of them that I felt at least were being on the level with me were kind of saying it without saying it to not go down the Marvel DC road. And so that's what I did. Never worked for Marvel DC, never worked for another publisher. I just kind of made my own stuff, and then Alterna became what it became. Went to school for graphic design and all that other stuff too, but it's like I didn't have a background in working for some other publisher. I did a lot of work for other indies to learn and grow, but in terms of working for another publisher, that didn't really happen. Now, I think what happens here with falling in and out of love, I think we have a lot of people that maybe, and you guys can probably chime in with this too when I put the link in a few minutes. I'm really wondering, did you guys fall in and out of love with comics at certain points in times? And maybe, obviously, possibly, I'm guessing you're here today, back in love. And I'm wondering when that happened for you. Because I had a talk last night with Mike Murphy. And based on the talk last night, we kind of touched base on a couple different things that had occurred in comics and storytelling wise in particular. Far before it seemed like everyone was sort of walking a tightrope on eggshells at the same time. Far before that, the advent of social media and everything you said was being held against you. It felt like storytelling had switched up and changed, and things had happened that made us go, I don't really know what's going on. It's just not the same stuff it used to be. It's just not as good. It's just something's gone awry. And for me, a big thing that we were talking about last night is essentially the storytelling style of comics shifting more towards event-driven. Because if I had to, I was thinking about it all last night. If I had to pinpoint it, it was all that. Now, there were always events on some level. Always. And sometimes some were bigger than others in an annoying friggin' way. But there were always those things. But still, comics were mostly predominantly full of different issues, different titles that you could read, enjoy that issue, and you didn't really need to know too much about the other ones to get the gist of what's going on in this one. And when I got out of comics several different times, it was always because an event was so underwhelming, so disappointing, so frustrating. Then you look back at the time you spent reading, the money you spent buying, and it makes you just want to just chuck them all. You know, I sold a vast majority of all the ones that had really frustrated me. There's still like thousands of comics that mean something to me. And if I had to really dwindle it down, probably 200 to 300 that I don't think I could ever really sell. It would have to be a specific situation in my life. But every single time, there was never one issue that was a standalone type issue where I thought, that's it for me, this series is done. It was always an event that had occurred. And it was always frustrating at the end of it because you're thinking there's a build up to something crucial is going to happen, something that matters, right? I mean, why have an event if something's not going to happen? It's just going to kind of go back to either the status quo or make things so much worse, you know? And once you start doing that, it's like if I pitch something to you guys that revolves around an event, already you're thinking logically it's only going to go one of a couple different ways. You know, heroes win, heroes lose, someone dies, someone maybe something happens to someone that they have to now change the trajectory of how they're going to do what. There's only a couple things that are going to occur by the end of that event, however that shakes out. You know, but story to story, it's all about building, constantly about building. An event is about destroying, because that's the thing that's climactic. You can't really have an event pay off for the most part. Very few have ever done this successfully. Where you actually have built something and now I think honestly the only one I could think off the top of my head would probably be like Secret Wars, the first one with the black costume. And if they didn't have the black costume come in there for Spider-Man, I don't think that that's as like an iconic of an event as people would remember it, because it kind of becomes meaningless, and then it becomes extra meaningless when you had Secret Wars 2. So all of the issues that build, all of this stuff is like, you know, you're creating a more complex world. You're creating more characters to interact with each other. You're creating these stories that are developing characters while also giving you plots that are entertaining and memorable. Everything that was great about comics. Event style event-driven storytelling. To me, that every single time was a definitive end for me. And once that event ended, I was done. And that's if I even got on board to begin with. So I'm really curious as to what you guys, if when you jumped on, off, etc. with various comics. Now I'm gonna put the link here in the chat, because I think what will actually, and I talked to Mike about this last night, I think what'll actually drive more interest in comics, this is, again, my own personal opinion, I think what'll drive more interest in comics on the indie level is to not get in the headspace of telling stories that are like mini events, super plot driven type stories, but more about character development and following characters and building upon the world, building upon characters, building upon what your story is, while also having cohesive and individual plots play out issue to issue. So it's not just about building, and then there's never a payoff. Every issue there's a payoff. Every issue there's some kind of conclusion that occurs that affects the characters involved, and you build upon that. That's what made comics great. If I had to quantify it, that's what made comics exciting. That's what made comics feel organic. That's what made them feel like you were peeking into what was happening, this week or this month with your friends, with the characters that you're getting to know, because it felt like there was always something new occurring. When you're stuck in an event, it's kind of difficult to push forward the concept of new. New is, how long this event goes on. And the most exciting thing that generally will happen is what? Again, a character death? It's like a TV show trying to wrap up that, there's a death, there's a wedding, there's a new kid, they move. It's all a dream, it's always in some fashion that makes you go, man, was that worth it? Again, very few endings on that level are worth it. But if it wasn't an event-driven way of telling that story, and every single episode, or in comics case, every single issue, felt like there was a new story, there was a new plot. Because if you're not reading comics to have a new plot, to experience something new, to get something new out of the character, out of the art, out of the story, out of whatever, to see stuff or read stuff that you might have never read before or seen before, or if you have, it's not exactly in the same capacity and context. So it's not repeating, but maybe it rhymes. Maybe it reminds you of something else. The truly greats will probably, you go, wow, I never thought that was even possible to tell a story like this in the comic book medium. And again, those are few and far between, even for some of the greatest creators that ever made comics. But they are out there, and the only way they get out there is by getting in that format, in that mode of telling these stories and trying to come up with characters and settings and plots and keep it fresh. Once you start putting event-driven plus decompressed storytelling, like events were already bad enough when you had compressed storytelling. At least you felt like you got your issues worth, right? But then when event-driven storytelling comes in with decompressed storytelling, holy crap. It's a torture session. It's just torture. Why would anyone want to put themselves through that time and time again? Yet the whole industry, for the most part, was hell-bent on that. Just everything had to be based towards that. It's the strangest thing. And then the sales don't go that great, and they don't go, oh, maybe we did something wrong here. We should mix it up. We should look back at, well, what worked? what was it? Like, study what worked and what you did, and go, what was it about this? And even just throw ideas out there as to why you think this issue, this character, speaks to people more than this issue and this other character. And look at that and go, find the pattern. Find the pattern, and don't just go, cherry pick one thing and one thing. Take a large sample size, and especially these companies that have been around for decades, they have a real large sample size to excavate. Because I don't think it's the event style stuff. It's like the big drop off every time. And then even in the 90s, you see the language being used to blame the customer. It's the collector bubble burst. It's not the publisher gimmick bubble burst. It's the collector bubble burst. The collectors just destroyed comics, is basically what that means. So it's the fault of the customer that they're not coming in and buying cases of crap anymore. Strange. It's strange. Again, I can't really think of a time where any other form of entertainment did that, where they just kind of were like, well, it's all the customer's fault. They're just not coming in to buy all the crap we're making. We're gonna still make the crap. We're still making a lot of crap, but it's their fault that they're not gonna buy it. Crazy, absolutely crazy. It doesn't do anything to, Secret Wars 2 more secret or there's a lot of different things that happen within comics that obviously will make some people drop off. So creative team change is one, depending on what occurs. But it's usually because of the fact that it's such a sharp and harsh direction somewhere else. It's not a cohesive fit. It's not like handing the baton during the relay race and it's just a smooth transition and the person just keeps on taking off. It's usually like you stop dead in your tracks, you hand them the baton, they drop it, they fumble it, they're all over the place, it rolls around, they're looking for it. In the meanwhile, they hit all the other runners and the runners are all just falling all over each other. That's usually what happens when it's a harsh creative team split, where you're like, here's this other, and sometimes that might occur because there's things that have occurred at the company and the publishing line and things like that. So I do get it that things happen. It can't always be a smooth transition. But for the reader, it's still, the outcome is the same. It's negligible what happens at the publisher and how it happens. It's just the fact that it does happen. You're not obligated to stay there, and maybe you come back later and you pick up, where you left off, or you try something else, or you continue with a different creative team when they come on board. But a lot of people will leave when the transition is very bumpy, or sometimes the transition works so well. You get like Liefeld on New Mutants, and that shot through the roof. Say whatever about Rob Liefeld, but he turned that title into a cash cow. It's a huge difference in popularity when he came on board and what he did for that title. So there's all these different things that occur, obviously. But for me, if I have to take the whole sample size of whenever I got my heart broken as a reader within comics, it was usually because they lost the magic, because they were all about the event. And it didn't matter anymore about these characters as these fictionally living, breathing individuals and what they were going through and what they were doing and what kind of conflicts and situations they were in. It mattered more about how to harp on, taking the most out of the reader, out of the customer, because that's the ideal behind an event, right? Especially if you could drag it out. All right, looks like I got somebody in the back joining me today, so everybody welcome Rachel. Hey, what's up,
Hi,
Rachel?
Everyone. Hi,
Thanks for
Sweden.
joining tonight.
Thanks for having me on here.
No problem. Thanks for being here. So, what are your thoughts on this?
Um, I don't know, like I actually have no thoughts at the moment. I just listen to you, and trying to get on. But like, I would love comics like as a little kid, and like I'm an artist like by like nature, anyways. So I'm trying to actually start up my own like comic book company. But I kind of have a lot of things that work against me right now. But I finally got a nice art desk right there. So
Nice.
I got some nice paper, so I just gotta get the ideas kind of like formulated better in my head. So I'll get there eventually.
Um, Whoa, looks like I hope that's not for you. Is there any moment in time in terms of comics where you fell out of love and then back in love again?
Actually, the Spider-Man Clone Saga kind of like pushed me out of like Marvel, and DC was kind of like didn't have really anything really interesting at the time. After like the Crisis on Infinite Earths, they had like the whole reboot, and just didn't have the same like dramatic like ambience that it had before. I felt anyways. And
Yeah,
then
yeah,
I started to actually get into anime after that because by that time I was like in my 20s, and and anime is what kind of got me into manga, which I still read to this day after 20 something years. You know, like there's two titles that I read like online. It's like Kingdom and Space Brothers or Ichio Kadai, and Kingdom, like the last chapters I read was just there was like this major battle, and like just the sequencing and like detail that he put into the artwork, like it was just amazing for me. I was like it's an awe. And if you ever
yeah,
get a
yeah,
chance, you should read Kingdom. Like it's such a well done manga like series. And it's actually based on like historical records from China too. So even like kind of like makes little like judgment errors, on his storytelling based on it, but it kind of like has that consistent flow to it. So
yeah.
that's one of the ones that I recommend.
Nice, nice. Um, I got somebody else waiting in the green room. I appreciate you stopping by though to say hi.
Hey,
Thanks a
if
lot,
you ever
Rachel.
need me again, and if I'm watching you, I'll gladly come on anytime. You always have more in-depth conversations. If you want to talk about like space development, like go James Webb.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Man, oh man. All right, thank you so much, Rachel.
All
Take
right,
it easy. Have a
cool.
wonderful night.
Yeah, you too. Later, everyone.
All right, up next we got Paul. What's up, Paul?
Hey, Mr. Pete, how you doing?
Hey. Oh, you got the microphone where it only comes in one side of my ear.
Is it going left ear again?
Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna try to even that out. Let's see.
Okay.
All right. I think it's good. Yeah. Okay.
Give it a shot there. Can you hear me in your right ear?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, good.
Awesome.
Now you're sounding loud and clear.
All right, perfect. Yeah, actually, comics for me, I'm on, I think, my third age now. And I think this is mostly because of all the indie guys, CG and Alterna. First age, I kind of fell into it with my brother. He was working at a comic shop and I was 10. And it was a crazy time because that was Death of Superman, Image, Valiant was going. So there was a lot of excitement in comics. And there wasn't really anything I think that comics did that made me fall out of it. It was just he ended his job there and I didn't go back.
Mm.
But the second age is probably one of my more fond ones because somebody introduced me to cross-gen, and that's when I jumped in. And then another buddy who was following Marvel was showing me how they relaunched everything with the Ultimates universes. So I was checking those out, and that one ended bittersweetly because I mentioned it in the chat. They went right from Blackest Night into Brightest Day. And at
Yep.
that point, I was like, I'm just getting milked. This isn't fun anymore. And it's a shame because I think, what was that? I was in college at the time, and I was discovering Grant Morrison's New X-Men. Who was it? Warren Ellis had Planetary. There was just a lot of really good, like well-written series. So like artwork wise, I'd say it was like John Cassaday, artists like that were just really just amazing during that time. And then CrossGen just kind of folded after a while. There was rumors that it was kind of an untenable business model, which seemed
Yeah, yeah.
unfortunate, but it was weird at the time because I think they had comics that didn't have any ads in them. So you were like, oh, I don't know how long this is going to last. And well, lo and behold, it didn't. But and then I started up the Third Age. Actually, I think it was you had something with Alterna where if you wrote about your local comic shop, if that they why they were special to you, you would send them an Alterna package, and I did that
Oh
for
yeah,
my buddy Brian over here, who had a local shop.
nice.
And it was a nice kind of gesture to show that I really like, because at the time I was just going through previews over at his place and just getting he'd always say I was the oddball because I wasn't getting any Marvel or DC. I was ordering like reprints of the old Prince Valiant comic and all kinds of just ancient weird stuff. Anything that looked weird in previews that kind of looked interesting, I was
Yeah,
picking up. And I wanted to thank him for going through all the effort to try to hunt those down for me. So
yeah.
but yeah,
We did the comics care package for the retailers. If somebody wrote in, that man, talk about unrequited love.
oh geez.
I think we sent over 100, and only 2 shops wrote us back to thank us.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. Yeah, at the time too. What killed that kind of situation with that comic shop was COVID. Pretty much destroyed everything. I'm not sure. I forget when exactly the when you did that promotion. If that was post or pre-COVID.
Oh man, I can't remember. I want to say it might have been mid 2020, so right around COVID time. But it feels like it was earlier. I honestly, it's so horrible. The last 3 years feel like one just giant. Talk about decompressed storytelling.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
These 3 years feel like decompressed storytelling.
Yeah. For sure.
Just dragging the long 1 year out. Remember when every 5 years it felt like the whole planet changed? Like music changed, movies changed, styles changed. You have like 1969, you have Woodstock, and then like 74, 75, you've got disco.
Disco. Yep.
Like,
and then disco. What was it? Late
and,
70s. You had some really good like kind
start
of the
getting
start
metal,
of metal
and punk,
Yep.
and and then by mid 80s, you've got a new wave and everything else, and pop all of a sudden all over the place. Every 5 friggin' years was like what we go through now in like 25 years.
Yeah.
It's very strange. Very strange.
It's weird. Yeah. It seems like kind of development has slowed down, and they're trying to. I don't know. People are trying to squeeze more out of what's here, but we're just done with it. We're kind of bored, and it's not going anywhere.
Perpetually distracted, I guess.
Yeah, well, geez. Yeah, well, especially, I don't want to sound like an old guy, but definitely with the phones. We were bringing this up in Geronimo's chat earlier when he was drawing, just how staring at these screens has kind of reduced our attention spans to nothing, and people are just kind of not paying attention.
It's always funny to me every time when I hear people, and I used to believe it too, when they're like, oh, we get all this technology and then we can do so many more things because the technology will make it easier. So it'll open up all this time for us to accomplish so much more. Yep. And I'm like, you look back at history, it doesn't have a good scorecard for that. It's usually got every time we invented something that we thought was going to make life so much easier for us, it made us so much lazier. And it made us push back. It made us distracted. It made us completely just more I guess a tendency more towards being self-absorbed and more insular.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So every time when I hear that from people, and we're hearing so much of it now with like more of a push towards tech being this all-encompassing, centralized sort of thing in some weird way, and that's how the whole world is being pushed as well. I'm always like, I'm not going to accomplish crap. We're going to accomplish even less.
Right. And that's the crazy thing. You have a phone now that memorizes everybody's phone numbers, but you spend less time on it because people are worth less calling. Like it used to be, you would know somebody's phone number, and that would mean something special.
It's a portable computer. It's not a phone,
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, at the risk of sounding like a Luddite, I'll just say that anyway. But so yeah, when it comes to comics, I was thinking about it a lot after the show I had with Mike last night, and thinking about when comics really started for me seeming like the wheels were falling off, and that's when it started becoming so event driven and so much more not about the issue you currently had and were enjoying, but about the 10 that you were supposed to buy later on this year from a bunch of other titles that you never wanted to read to begin with, because you have to get the whole story to know the event. And then all of a sudden, the way that a lot of comics started getting told was in the same fashion. And then, miniseries after miniseries, reboot after reboot.
Yeah.
I don't know how anyone honestly can stick with big two comics at this point.
Well, I think that's why during that time, that's why Kirkman had such a meteoric launch. He was just like, we're just doing Invincible. It's about this kid. That's it. There's other characters that show up, but it's his story.
Yeah.
Or he had Walking Dead, same thing. It's just about this. There's no other people jumping in. Hellboy's not going to show up or any other, independent stuff. It's just my story, and it's going to go from beginning to end. Done. That's it.
Yeah. And then, I've seen it a lot as a publisher with a lot of people that want to come on the scene with the whole universe of like, here's 10 to 12 titles, this whole universe, and you're going to want to buy every single title from the entire line. And it never works out. It never works out. You can't build a universe in such an inorganic way. It's better to focus it on one book, build that book up, and then if demand really truly is there, and you're able to, and you want to expand upon it, then I guess expand upon it. Even though I still look back and it still confuses the hell out of me as to why would you need, like, let's say Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man, Spectacular Spider-Man, Web of Spider-Man, etc., etc. Why would you need to necessarily do that instead of just having one cohesive Spider-Man title and put out maybe 5 or 6 issues a month? And even if every single issue maybe had someone that was kind of a different creative team, editorial could still keep track of the story being played out. And you'd have all the readers then reading the one issue, all of them talking about it, and then having that one issue constantly selling 1 to 2 million copies a month. Your advertising revenue would have been killer. Your print runs would have been, economy of scale would have been amazing. And then the cost of overhead, instead of managing and trying to market all these other different titles, you could have condensed it down to one. And every company was doing that with, and every company, both the big two were doing that with all of their titles.
Well, yeah, because that was the big thing with After Death of Superman. When Superman came back, that was one thing I never understood, because I was like 10 at the time, but there were 4 comics for 4 different Supermen, because there was Man of Steel, Superman, and 2 other comics. Superman had 4 comics at the time. I didn't realize. I was like, that's kind of silly when you think about it, but it was an interesting way to tie those characters in. But yeah, you don't need 4 series for one guy. Just tell his story, and everybody will stay on it.
Yeah. It doesn't seem like it would have made as much financial sense as I've heard it spun, where they're like, well, if you have all these other titles, then all the readers are going to start buying the other titles too. And I'm like, well, you shouldn't. You could just keep them still on one title and just put out more of that title. Like you could still, instead of the once or twice a month, maybe you put out 8. Maybe you put out 8 issues of that, two a week of that. That would have been incredible. And it's because then you get the collector mentality. So you're like, well, they're going to put out 8 issues. I gotta get it. I'm already getting it, Yep. And then, yeah, you don't have to kind of collect this and the other thing. And then, when things would go, okay, now pick it up in the next issue, but it's not the next issue of the series. It's the next issue of the other series that you'd never really read. You're like, oh man, I gotta go read that. And now I gotta get an issue like 9 of this other one I don't read.
And that's where you'd get those little weird blurbs from Stan saying, oh, all right, true believers, you have to read this to follow this. And you're like, what? Oh, man. And you'd have to run back to the newsstand to get it. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. There's so many weird things that happen within comics. And this is definitely like a commiseration show tonight. But I'm seeing a couple chances right now to course correct where the mainstream is going wrong, but I'm seeing one too many people when I'm just kind of taking a step back and looking. I'm seeing one too many people that are literally going, hey, look at everything the mainstream is doing. Let's just do that better. That's the equivalent of saying, "Hey, look at that car with square wheels." Well, if we put rectangle wheels, maybe it'll drive better.
Yep.
Why? It's already broken. You gotta do something totally different. You gotta do something that works. And looking at what the mainstream is doing, and saying, well, this broken thing, we'll still have it broken, but maybe do it better than what the broken thing is like. You gotta go and you gotta look back at when did this stuff work, and it wasn't just primarily because of the distribution. It wasn't primarily because of the world being the way it was compared to the world being the way it is now. It was a storytelling style. It was something that just spoke and resonated with a great deal many people, and still does. Does your shop, do you have one of those shops that still sells new comics, or do you have a shop that's gone more to the back issues?
Oh, geez, I think the last time I was at a shop, I mostly collect trades for the most part. The individual issues, I couldn't even imagine what I'd be picking up now for the most part. What was nice for a while, it seemed like Marvel, even though this was, I'm thinking 2019 through 2021. I forget when his shop closed, but every time they were reintroducing or using a character for something, they would release key issues from back in the day for $1. And that was when I would go and get those for dirt cheap instead of hunting down the older versions for them and actually getting good comics. And I think those are the only new things printed by Marvel that I've got in the past 15 years, to be honest.
Were those the True Believer line? Is that what that was?
Yeah, I believe that was it.
Yeah. Again, it's so many different things that were done within the industry, and now it's like the tail wags the dog, because now you got the movies dictating to the comic companies how and what they're going to do. And it's not that the movies are being reflected in the comics, but the comics are being basically treated as if these things are like the Happy Meal toy. Not like the big show. It's not like making the comics as the primary show and then also the movies as the primary show. It's so secondary. And that kind of a thing, it doesn't worry me for independence so much as it worries me for a lot of other people out there who, because let's face it, we're all a lot of independent creators out there. We're all small, no matter who the biggest independent creators you could think of. I don't care if at this point it's like Ethan or Eric July or whoever in terms of sales or whatever. They're still super small in terms of the awareness for the character and the creator. They're not bigger than Batman.
No.
So and it's not to insult anything that they're doing or whatever, because they're accomplishing a hell of a lot considering. But because of the way that is, we have to work so much harder. We have to do things to really get the attention of the reader so much more. So we're still, in a way, dependent upon the tentpole of the big two and whoever else to say that this is what comics are generally like.
Yep.
They're the major leagues. So if the major leagues suck, no one's going to go to the minors expecting them to be better. It's very unlikely. I think the only time that's starting to happen now, and it kind of mirrors what's happening, I guess, in comics, would probably be professional wrestling. That's the only time I'm seeing it across the board where all of a sudden it looks like the independent side of it and the smaller side of it is starting to get some ground, because they're bringing back what people loved about it to begin with.
Oh, yeah. Well, I that's the thing. I mean, you get tired of the WWE kind of formula of it's like 60% mic work, 40% in-ring work. It's like, we just want to see these guys wrestle. It used to be back in the day, you'd have Macho Man cut a promo, boom, do it, done, that's it. You do it in the ring. Don't have them standing there staring at each other talking with microphones. You just film a promo, then have them wrestle. But these days, I don't know if they're too averse to having their talent get injured or what it is, but it was boring, and that's why you see the rise of like AEW, was at New Japan Wrestling. Ring of Honor was great when it was going. There's a lot of really good independents for sure for wrestling, and I think it was because Vince bought everything up and tried to make a monopoly, and he just released a product that nobody was interested in anymore.
Yeah, the monopoly breeds complacency among the business, and it takes advantage of the customer. That's just the evil. That's just the simplest evil of a monopoly. Once you start getting into more complex kind of monopolies, and especially in terms of relying upon them, you get corruption involved. You get all kinds of other things. But yeah, it's the same thing. The same thing within comics. It's almost like it was a given for so long about so many different things across the board within that structure, at least 30 solid years. And it makes me worried. And the only reason I say that I'm worried is because of the fact that Alterna shut down submissions this year for the first time ever. And it was mostly because of what I was seeing was still so many people more than ever being influenced heavily, whether they realize it or not, by what was being put out at the mainstream. Because they look at the mainstream and go, that's the bar to reach. Now, when they're putting the bar relatively low, and they're, I'm getting pitches where they're leading with like the pronouns of the character and the sexuality.
God,
it would be like pitching Batman as, a cisgender white male.
Yeah.
That's how you start it.
A vigilante drama told in the eyes of a waspish, rich child who was orphaned at a young age or whatever.
You're like, what the hell?
Yeah, not going to sell it. But it's interesting. I was looking up the old pulps back in the day, and because of the circumstances with World War II and the paper shortage, what it boils down to is you need a unique character. Any of the characters that were clones or just another gunfighter in the Wild West, they all died. They were just wiped out. Year to year, they just less and less of them. The only guys that stuck around were like Tarzan, the Shadow, guys that were vastly different from each other, but they kind of had that aspect or that archetype, and they held on to it. Anybody that was like a cheap copy of them, the distribution fell off because everybody wanted what was unique and interesting and original. Those guys, not the copies of them.
Exactly. And what you just said there too is been not just universal, but it has stood the test of time across the board for anything ever in regards to humanity. We love the new thing that comes along. It's fascinating. It captures our imagination. It starts making us think in new and creative ways. It makes us aspire for something. It inspires us. It makes us think the impossible is possible. And especially when it comes to storytelling, you see the influx of there was almost a time period where it didn't even matter really about of how good it might have been. It was about, is this new? Is this something that we haven't done yet? And put that out there and try still to make it as good as possible. But the first thought instead was, what is this? Is this something that has already been done to death? And then everything else you can, it's all about editing and revision after that. But conceptually, you got to start with showing something to people that they may have not seen before. And even if it's going to be that whole adage of, everything under the sun's been done already and whatever, you still at least want to try to not make it such a direct knockoff or inspiration of something that was so derivative that it feels like, well, why am I here wasting my time? And that's why I always try to tell creatives out there that are pitching their stuff, especially to the readers, leave behind that whole, it's like this meets this and then put that together and you get that.
Yep.
Because you're already going to put yourself behind the ball of you've drawn comparisons, you're giving yourself weird standards, and then you're also saying that it's just as simplistic as that. So you're being so reductive to your creation that you're actually doing it a massive disservice to say that it is just like these other things and you mix them together and then that's what you get, and that'll communicate it to you. And then they take advantage of the fact that people even know what they're talking about, or that they're a fan of that thing. So just talk about it as if nothing else exists. Talk about it like this is an original creation, and it's not dependent upon what has existed before it, even though it may be influenced by it. And that's something that a lot of creators, not even new ones too. I see a lot of creators who've been doing this for even years and years, sometimes even longer than me, still try to pitch it in that fashion, and then they don't really talk about what their creation is about, and get out of that. I mean, I can't imagine if Marvel pitched everything based off of DC, and DC pitched everything based off of Marvel, to go, yeah, this it's like Blue Beetle, it's like Spider-Man meets Iron Man.
Right.
And or Iron Man, it's like Batman, but he's got armor on instead.
Yep.
That would be so strange to see the companies do that.
Wasn't that how Liefeld got around to creating Deadpool, though? He was like, I really want to write, what's his name from DC, Deathstroke. So
that story has been so, it's so murky. I've heard it as that, and then I've heard him say it's not that. But then people are like, Wade Wilson, Slade Wilson,
right?
Deathstroke, Deadpool, relatively same sort of skill set, more or less.
But it's weird. You had those kind of crossover characters like Darkseid, Thanos. There's a lot of kind of mirror or chirality, I suppose, between DC and Marvel, where they're just like, oh, that's good. I'm going to take that too.
But they still didn't pitch it to the customer.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They definitely tried to say, oh, no, this is a totally original idea.
Exactly.
It just happened to look exactly
till they died. It was like, nope, take that secret to the grave.
Yeah. But I think going back to Rob and his book, Blood Realm, this is why it really kind of resonates, I think, is because it's dark fantasy. There's very little of kind of the Tolkien aspects. It doesn't feel like D&D or any of the kind of trope fantasy that's out there. It's a unique kind of his own take on fantasy. And that's why it's like sometimes it's fine to take a genre. It's fine to have a Western. You just have to make it your Western. Why is it interesting? What makes it different? And you can sell it. It doesn't you see that a lot of people try to make the unique thing. They try to get the lightning in a bottle. I'm reinventing this or whatever. And it's just like, just focus on what you want to tell. And if it's interesting enough, it'll sell. And if it doesn't, ditch it and try something new. I don't think people are kind of iterating enough anymore in comics.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree. And it's a shame. I mean, faster than any kind of culture war in terms of what's occurring. Because I see so many people talk about like the culture war, and the culture war is there, but the way that you win the culture war is to create culture by defending the culture that you don't want to see erased, and that's it. But you still have to create. You can't just defend it, and you can't just call out the other side. And you have to win not just minds but hearts, especially. So you have to do something that resonates, that speaks to the soul, that speaks to people and makes them care. It doesn't just make them go, yes, it's good. It's got good lettering, it looks nice, it sounds interesting. You got to hit them in the heart. Because if you don't get them in the heart, if they don't care about it, if they're not emotionally invested, if the character at the end of the day, if the story at the end of the day is just, yeah, it's good. If it's not speaking to somebody, it's not going to last. It's not going to last. That stuff doesn't last. There's plenty of things that are, oh yeah, they look good. They're solid. They've been done well. But they don't speak to anybody. And that's the key, is really finding something that speaks to people. And by having it first, hopefully, if you're the creator, having it speak to you. Creating a story where you're getting wrapped up in the emotion of it, that you're taken aback by the stuff that is happening, that you're putting these characters through, the things that they're doing. Creating stories of hope and inspiration and triumph and adversity and everything else. That's important. We can call out people all day long or point to why they're doing something the wrong way, but if we're not going to end up doing something that isn't just good enough, but something that's more like we're trying to create something that's special, that means something not just to us but to others. If we're not going to set out to do that, then we have already lost the battle. And so I'm seeing a lot of people that are like, yeah, let's just put stuff out there and see what works. It's got to be more than that. It's got to be more. Brian says, I worry that the collapse, and if you want to go at any point in time, I don't want to keep you if you want to, but you could stay if you'd like.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
He says, I worry that the collapse of the mainstream comics will make printing independent comics become harder. Will that be an issue? If the mainstream fully collapsed, that would be an issue in some respect. But I don't see it collapsing to the point where it becomes too much of an issue, especially for indies, because mainstream comics aren't necessarily the things keeping those printers afloat. It was a big deal back in the day when they all kind of abandoned the newsprint format. That was relatively a bigger deal. But in terms of printing comics, there's so many independent creators that aren't even utilizing anything more than digital printing, which is relatively small, under 500 or so copies. So to get to the bigger numbers and the bigger printers, you really have to be printing 5,000, 10,000 plus. So I don't see that necessarily impacting it, but if there were an entire collapse, I mean, it always impacts something. It always impacts something, because then depending on the paper stocks used, depending on that kind of a thing, the printer might purchase less, and then your unit cost goes up, and then it maybe makes it less economically viable to do it. You know, maybe your comic, it was $5, now you got to get it sold for 10. And will that same comic sell for 10 that used to sell for 5? So it's all of that kind of stuff. But yeah.
That's what I found was interesting, was people going to Jostens for getting things printed, and it made sense when I thought about it for a minute, because I was like, yeah, they have a busy season for yearbooks, but then it's just like they have all this equipment and people sitting around. Why not have them? Yeah, they're making comic books or graphic novels, RPG books, whatever. You can get it done through them. So it would probably affect printers at some point if the big two went under. I don't see it happening soon. They're kind of it's the slow kind of sinking of the Titanic. It's going to probably take another decade or so, but there's still like the little things that we're not paying attention to, like Scholastic. They're printing a lot of kind of graphic stuff, so it'll be around.
Absolutely. And then aside from that, they're printing more of like a catalog that's going to be a freebie than a comic book. So yeah, there's a lot of different jobs that printers are doing that they're not necessarily. It's not like it's a comic book printer. I think the only one I could think of, and I don't even know if they're still around, they probably are, would be Brenner in Texas, that was really just specializing in comic books. But their costs have, I think, quadrupled over 15 years.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. And there's various reasons for it, but I'm sure that one of them is also the amount of the volume of comics just isn't there the way it used to be. So, like I said, they can't purchase as much as they used to in terms of the paper stock, and then paper costs go up. Let's see. Janko says, the way we win the culture war is by transcending politics with great storytelling. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's just about making the best possible thing you can make that will move people, that will resonate. And some people can do that and still harp on, because that's the thing, is I don't mind politics within a comic that pertain to what's occurring within the comic. It's more about the comics transcending the politics, transcending the comic and becoming a weird propaganda pamphlet that's supposed to brainwash you into thinking a certain way.
Well, and that's where they get into that crazy argument of, oh, X has always been political, and it's like, yeah, to a point, the Twilight Zone was always political, but it was written in a way that it could be told about anybody. It wasn't aiming at a specific political party or faction.
Yeah, so and that wasn't the point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
it's so reductive to think of that. I'm like, man, the only time I could think when comics were overtly political, and that was the point, was when they were propaganda comics in the 50s, and Superman told you to slap a Jap.
Yep.
It's like, so you want to get to that and hold that as the pinnacle of storytelling? Of like, oh, it was always political. It was always, yeah. always political. It was so always political. I have to go back to the time before segregation to find when they were so always political, and find something that's so overtly about being propaganda.
They were so political that they were banned, for how ugly they were. I mean, racially on top of other things.
And they weren't enjoyable by the people that were purchasing them, and they had to go, you know what? Can't really make those for that long. So it really is. It's interesting to see people do that. I saw something the other day where it just made me cringe so hard. This is something I saw years ago, but someone had found it and reposted it. Something to what you were saying, where they were like, this was always about that. If you didn't get that, then you didn't get this. That kind of a thing. Like Superman was always about immigration. If you didn't get that, you didn't get Superman. And I'm like, man, it sounds like you haven't really read many Superman comics.
Right.
I mean, if you're talking about one tiny aspect of the Superman character and being so reductive as to say that all of Superman and all of the stories and all of everything is just about immigration. Goodness. I guess all those storytellers failed.
Right.
And it's the same thing across the board. And it was a way to kind of finger wag at anyone right wing and say that, right wing equals racist and yada yada and a bigot. And then I'm thinking, and I'm like, this sounds like a very bigoted thing to write just in general. Like you're thinking that only a right wing person could be bigoted?
Yeah.
I've met many a left winger that was pretty bigoted and pretty racist. Right to my face.
Well, and that's the crazy thing. I think I was a card-carrying member of the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund in the early 2000s, that, in college and all that, and that was when they were very pro-free speech. Now, I mean, who are they fighing for now?
Now they're very appropriate speech,
Exactly.
And do they agree with it? Is that the right speech? Man, oh man, yeah. So, seeing things like that occur, have nudged along certain things, and this is like that latest break, I think, with a lot of people where they feel a certain way, but storytelling wise, it always goes back to that. It always affects that, seeing that push, because I feel like event driven storytelling naturally tends to force a narrative. So once you have a forced narrative, because it's all about getting to the climax of that event and dragging it out as long as you can because you want to keep people buying, that has brought about this way of forced weirdness across the board within storytelling, because they can't just tell an organic story that flows and is about the single issue. Whether the creators can't do it, won't do it, or the publishers don't want it to happen, it's not happening. So it doesn't matter at the end of the day who's responsible for whatever. It's still happening, largely. And in the indie sphere, we're seeing people that are trying to tell stories that are more impactful and relatively self-contained and that kind of a thing. But I think that that's not just enough. We have to, and we're going to get there, I think. But we have to really start thinking about how to create something that truly resonates with others and really hits home. And I want to see friggin' people tweeting about how this comic made them have emotions. And this comic made them, really think about something. This comic made them, get a lump in their throat. The room got dusty all of a sudden. I want to see people talking about a story that moves them. Because once we start seeing more of that, wow, this really moved me, this really hit home. What would happen here with this, I absolutely relate to that. When we have moments like that, when we have characters like that, that's when we know we're on the verge of creating something that's going to last, because it means something to people. Paul, with that, I'm going to have to bid you adieu. I've got somebody else in the green room. It was great having you on, though. Appreciate the discussion.
Oh, absolutely, man. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, no problem. Let's see, we've got Hidden Hand Media. What's up? Thanks for joining tonight.
How you doing? How's my sound?
Sounding good.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I feel bad interrupting that conversation. That was a good conversation.
Oh, no problem.
You guys you just brought it back, because I'm 44, right? So you just reminded me of something talking about how the identity politics and all that is in comics now. Because I don't know if you remember, I think it was the early '90s or late '80s. They like restarted the Justice League, and they were all kind of having personal problems. It was like Guy Gardner. I think he just got dumped by like Power Girl or something, and she was self conscious about her boobs. The Blue Beetle got overweight, and he was self conscious about that. Like he was having personal problems, and like they were all. It was kind of like it was a comedy sort of, and then they had Booster Gold. I think he wanted to take
I
over.
remember that.
Like they did, and there was no action in the first couple issues either. And I was like, they did that right back then. Like that's the way. Like they weren't sitting around drinking Cosmos and stuff like that. Like there was no action, but it was interesting because they did it kind of like in a realistic way.
Yeah,
You
I
know?
felt like that was them trying to go like the Marvel way a bit.
Yeah,
Giving them more like personal problems and worries and faults, and with them dealing with it, but not in a like a what is that? That horrible Tom King crisis thing.
yeah.
Not like this weird, awkward peek in on a therapy session of a
Yeah,
series.
it wasn't snarky. It wasn't like, "Oh my God, I'm having so many problems."
Yeah, exactly.
You know, you just reminded me of that because I had a I was young at the time, but I had a neighbor and he had an older brother, and I didn't collect DC. I didn't know anything about DC, and he had all these DC comics, and I was like, wow, this is kind of like I kind of like DC a little better. It was a little darker, and it was a little because I saw Crisis. And like I'm into the art, so like I used to copy the art, and then I saw George Perez,
Oh, George Perez.
and I
Holy
just tried to.
smokes.
I was like 10 or 11, trying to copy like what he was doing, and I was like, it was almost impossible. But I was doing a lot of windows, like a lot of panels, and planets in the background for no reason. He didn't do it for no reason, but I would put like all this stuff in the background.
Yeah. Everything's a cosmic background.
Yeah, I still do that. Like sometimes I'll do a drawing. I'm like, why did I put all this stuff in the back or whatever? Like it doesn't even make any sense. Like I'll stop it. I'm like, there's 50 million things in the background. Like it's still George Perez is in my head now, you know. But I remember I used to collect all the time, and then I remember I used to get X-Men in the mail in like the late '80s, early '90s, and then I remember what made me stop was I don't know if it was around the time was when X-Men when they redid all the X-Men, like they redid #1 and they did X-Force, and they changed like they had so many people that they rearranged all the teams. Was that like the same time they
Oh,
killed
is that
Superman?
that's like the Jim Lee era?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Was
yeah.
that
With
around the same time they killed Superman?
they killed Superman a little bit later. Because like I mean, hell, Image Comics is what led DC to kill Superman and break Batman's back, and
Wow.
Marvel to, because that was a knee jerk response. So like we gotta get our market share back. They weren't necessarily beating them, but they were taking a lot of attention and a lot of market share from them. And that's what really caused them to come out with, let's just do something that just immediately just takes the attention of everything away, sucks the oxygen out of the room. And that was the response. And what an
I didn't like
interesting
that at all.
response.
I remember. I don't remember. It was so long ago. Like my memory's not that great. But when they redid the X Men, how many covers did they have for X Men One? Was it like 10 or
Oh
something?
no, it was like it was
Five?
four, and then it was the fifth was like a glossy edition.
And they were all wrapped in plastic. I think they all came in like a plastic wrapping or whatever.
Not the X-Men ones, but X-Force.
It was X Force.
X-Force had, I think, 4 or 5, but they were all the same cover, but they had a different trading card.
Yeah. I think I remember that wrong. I don't know. I think I had it in my head. I was like, they came out with like 10 X Men covers. Like I'm done. Like that's what I remember now. But I remember they were all wrapped in plastic, and I was like, I can't buy all these. Like, I was buying a lot of comics, but I was doing it like I was buying the Hulk for the art. Like Dale Keown's art
Yeah.
and Spider Man. But then yeah, there was just too much after a while.
Yeah.
And then I
Yeah.
found my cousin used to get a lot of the European stuff. Like he would get heavy metal, and he would get like Serpieri, like that Druna and all that stuff.
Mm.
And then I was like, this is way more. I mean, there's boobs and stuff. Like this is way more interesting. than the American stuff, and the art was just it was so different. Like I never saw stuff like that before, So I was like, this is way different than just like this is comic book art. These guys were seemed like masters. I mean, not that any of these Marvel and DC guys were bad, but it was the European stuff was just so different and like more dense,
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I mean the format was kind of born out of them rejecting the monthly comic,
Yeah, yeah.
and putting out these albums, basically, the graphic novel essentially, but in a more, I don't know, a little bit more of a masterful way with an understanding of that this isn't something that's going to be told within the continuity of something else. It was just a story being told in this format, which I thought was a great way to do it too. And even within the companies, when they started putting out graphic novels predominantly, more and more, I thought that was a great opportunity for them to put out something that had a higher price tag, was out of continuity, so you can get your artistic, whatever out and into this kind of format instead, and have something that was geared maybe more towards adults than towards readers of all ages.
Yeah.
Because there's a higher price tag, so it's already going to kind of communicate to kids and to parents, well, this thing costs like $15 or so, $20, as opposed to your $2, $1.50 comic. So it's obviously that's going to be a big ask for that kid to go, I want this one instead.
Yeah.
And it would have been a great way for them to continue the single issues, leave them alone, and then have these out of continuity stories be told as a graphic novel format. But instead it just became a way to just compile everything over and over and over again.
The covers were always amazing too, though. Like they had the best covers for those things,
Oh yeah. I mean, when especially when they were first starting to come out, I still have my my Dark Phoenix trade. I think it was the original version of it that came out, and it's in pieces, but it had like a Bill Sienkiewicz cover.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's great. And Brian, yeah, your wife is right. Yeah, 90s comics. I mean, a lot of comics in general are soap operas for boys.
Yeah.
It's very similar beats in the stories.
Yeah, I mean, they used to do. I remember sometimes every once in a while they do an issue like say Spider-Man or something. They do like a non-action issue like once in a while where they'd throw like he'd kind of just have like a regular day or something with, and like I don't know, there'd be some lesson at the end or something, and then he'd be off at the end. He'd be like, oh, he's off to fight like Electro or something at the end. I like those little things every once in a while too.
Yeah, more of a character-driven piece.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it helps to ground the character a bit without humiliating them.
Yeah.
Because that's often the way they'll ground characters nowadays, is by humiliating them. That's how they bring them down to earth. Not so super now, huh? It's just like you don't need
crazy.
You don't need to constantly humiliate your characters.
I know, like I was gone from. I didn't watch like when they started making the movies. Like I was like, I watched Iron Man because I didn't know it was going to be like this whole universe, And I like Robert Downey Jr. I was like, damn, Iron Man was pretty good. I didn't watch any of the other movies, and I saw a couple on TV, and I was like, oh, I'll go see, I'll see Infinity War and stuff. I thought Infinity War was pretty, awesome. And then I was like, I never forget, like I was dating this girl, and I was like, we got to go see Endgame, And then I was talking about it for like a week. I was like, you sure it's gonna be like 3 hours? Like, you sure you want to come with me? You're probably not gonna know what's going on. And she's like, all right, yeah. And then I remember Fat Thor, and I got up and I was like, come on. And she's looking at me. She's like, "What's?" She's like, "You want to see this movie so bad for like the last couple of weeks, and you talking about it?" I was like, "Well, no, we got to go." And she's like, she made me stay for a little bit, and then I was like, "All right, if they build a time machine, I'm out of here." And they built a time machine.
Yeah. Yeah. Man.
And I mean, she went through the ringer with me because then everything was getting ruined around that time. Like Game of Thrones, the last episode, she watched that with me too. I was like, I was just sitting there like, oh my god, they just ruined all of these things because I was out of mainstream entertainment from the early '90s because of the comics, because they got greedy,
Yep.
and everything, you know. And then I was like, I can't believe this. I came back and I can't believe this has happened, and like they're just destroying everything.
Yeah, and they keep taking the they keep learning from the things that were mistakes and thinking that those were things that they should continue.
Exactly.
It's strange, you know. It's like, man, the '90s level of gimmicks with any kind of like a glow in the dark or an embossed cover or a
Yeah.
hologram cover, that sold a comic to me. I
Yeah.
understood, you know, okay, it's $1 or $2 more. You know, but gimmick or not or whatever, it looked cool and I dug it. And if it was a comic that I was reading already, like if it was a series I was already reading, it was a treat. It was special. I didn't view it as like this is something to get me on board for this comic.
Yeah.
But the gimmick aspect of it today that feels like such a weird, cheap kind of, you know, here's a bunch of variant covers, or here's a cover that's amazing, but the interiors are so lackluster.
I hated
You know, a lot of that bait and switch kind of stuff. Um, just that got me out in a big way. But before, at that point, like anytime I was even on the fence of trying out something again, got me right out. But in terms of creation, and I really want to stress this because my concern isn't any more towards the mainstream in comics. I think the mainstream in comics is kind of it's just inevitable. Whatever is going to happen with them is inevitable, and it has nothing to do with what we do. I see fans that often feel like, man, if we just gate kept more, or if we start to gatekeep more now, you know, we can really keep things as we love them. Not true, because we have people that are dealing with business decisions being made, and that's what's impacting. It's not about some fan coming in, or a group of fans, or 100 fans, or 1,000, or 1,000,000 fans coming in that are screaming on social media about wanting to do something. Like, people could scream on social. I could get the whole planet screaming to me about make King Cryptid a woman, a lesbian,
Give him a girlfriend or something.
or you give him a girl. You know, do something to the character that you don't want to do, but we want you to do it. You know what I'm gonna say? No,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
You know, I hope you like what I'm making, but I'm making what I'm making. You know, so you could have the whole planet. I don't care. As soon as you have someone within the decision-making process buckling under any kind of pressure that goes against the vision of what the story is, that goes against what is to the character, that is of service to the character and to the story, first and foremost, above all. Especially when you have characters that have been around for so long that have a legacy. As soon as you get people in the decision-making aspect of that buckle, it could be one person asking, and it doesn't matter. They're the ones that make that decision happen. They're the ones that pull the plug on that and say, "Yep, we do that." Okay, you could have the whole world screaming, "No, don't do that." If they listen to the one person then that's saying, "Yes, do that," because if you don't do that, you're X, Y, and Z kind of person, or this kind of company, or whatever, some rubbish, you know. And if they listen to them, or an initiative that comes on that's higher, and they don't have any integrity as a publisher, as a creator, whatever it may be, if they do that, that's the decision that gets made. It has nothing to do with the fan. It has nothing to. You could gatekeep all day long. You could tell someone all day long that no, you shouldn't do that. You know, this obviously isn't for you. Like a fan talking to another fan, let's say. You know, you want to destroy this thing. How do you even love it to begin with if you want it to be something that it's not? You know, it's kind of like getting in a relationship with someone and saying that you love them. Now, can you change completely?
Yeah.
It's
You
like,
have to
well,
stay steady, man.
yeah, it's kind of like, well, what do you love then?
Yeah.
You know,
as an artist too, it's like you have, like I used to do all kinds of different artistic things, and everybody had a different opinion. Like, oh, you should do this, or sometimes I'd be like, really? Like, you think I should change that, or do? And then I would be like doing something. And I'm like, I'm not even into what I'm doing anymore because I'm just listening to people now. You just have to stay steady with what you know. Nobody knows what really your vision is like deep down. Like,
yeah, exactly.
You
You
know?
got to have a vision. You got to have integrity. You got to have a spine. You know,
Yeah.
you can't just kind of any way the wind blows. Now, the part where I say listen to the reader is when you create a character, let's say, and they really like that character, and you didn't think that that character was going to take off. Well, find a way to make another story with that character.
Yeah.
That's it. You know, it's as simple as that. Now, if it's about changing your character intrinsically so that it fits the paradigm of someone else's what they think this character should be like, my response would be like, make your own character.
Exactly.
Do whatever you want to do with it.
Yeah, I'm trying to do that now. Like I don't know how I found you. I found you probably from watching Ethan Van Sciver or whatever. I don't even know how I found that, but I was like, oh my god, like there's people making comics themselves, and like I came up with like I'm coming up with like characters, and I never really did much writing before, and I was like, okay, like what do I like? I have this guy, and I'm like, what do I do with him? Like I have to make him, you know, give him a personality and a mission, and make the story that I'm making kind of. I'm like, oh my god, like so I'm like I have this story, and I started thinking about what I'm going to do, and then I'm like, what's the point of it? You know, I have to make sure when people get to the end or even the middle,
Yeah.
like there's some kind of thing going on. And like I wondered too, I want to ask you because you write stories and stuff. Is it possible to have a story without like an arc for a character, or would that be like,
totally.
kind of dumb?
Yeah, so you can have and that happens all the time. It's usually more of a plot-driven element where you don't have a character arc, or everybody else has the character arc and they're the central focus point. They're kind of like the constant that stays the way that they are. They're already fleshed out. They're already set in their ways, and you have a character in this particular situation where everything else around them is the thing that is kind of view them as the sun, and then the rest of everything else is the planets and whatnot going around them, and they're sucked in the orbit, and they're just that's how that character is. So they're the central focus. They don't need to necessarily change, but you do have to have a fully fleshed out and established type character. You can't have a character that's going to be like this wishy-washy personality. They got to be an A-type personality, confident and stuck in knowing they are who they are.
Yeah.
So as long as you can have a story like that that's set with someone that is that way, and you have the events around them playing out, and there's always a conflict. It doesn't have to be a huge conflict. It doesn't have to be, you know, something where it's like an earth-ending conflict. But you do need conflict. You do need stakes. You do need to communicate something to the reader as to why is this character being put in a certain situation that I should even give a crap about why they're in that situation.
Yeah, you have to care about at least something going on.
Yeah,
no matter what.
You know,
That's
and
more like noir, right? If without like an arc or something, it's kind of like that's the only thing I could think of is like some
a little bit.
detective or something like.
Yeah, so I would say that like okay, so the usual thing, like I'll show the Rocky clip at the beginning. Rocky's obviously it's a character arc. There's a lot of growth that Rocky experiences from the beginning to the end. But then you can have something, and it's easier to say it in film because comics are more of a long form. So if you're doing like a self-contained, like one kind of story, it's a lot easier to just say, you know, I'll give you video games, Super Mario, right? You're Super Mario and you're running around and you're being Mario. Mario doesn't really have like learning moments that make him change his course of being. Mario is Mario, you know, so he's going to do things. Doesn't mean that he doesn't. He's going to do things. He's going to be put in a situation where he has to overcome the situation. He'll even like learn how to adapt with certain things and do them. But there's none of these moments where he's going to all of a sudden have moments of clarity and development and growth as a person, you know. So you're going to have a lot of that stuff play out anyway. And a lot of that kind of plot driven stuff has those sorts of elements. But in terms of comics, again, you got to give a character a fairly set personality, and they're going to come across as relatively one or two dimensional. They're not going to come across, you know, as this three-dimensional, fully formed kind of individual. They're going to be set in their ways, and that's that. But you could totally do it. I mean, it has been done. It's just it's easier to do if it's within the realm of, and this is where I'm going back to, where I see a lot of that happening. I see a lot of people that are making, because of the nature of the independent, that they are making things that are generally, I'm telling the one story, and that's it.
Yeah.
So there isn't a tremendous amount of character growth. There's not really an arc that takes place. It's more about the characters put in a situation and how do they deal with the situation they're in.
Yeah.
So it's a lot more of that I see on the independent scene. And I think for us to kind of really create things that are impactful, you need that time. You need people to be there and see the progression, see the growth, see the world develop, see more characters enter into the mix, and how does your main character or characters, how do they interact with these other individuals?
I'm thinking of that. Or like, can you think of something? I don't know if it would ever work too. Do you know like a story that's about villains, like bad people the whole time, like they're the main characters, and like is there any? I can't really, because I don't know, it just popped in my head. I was like, what? Because I have like 3 villain characters, and I kind of have like the hero guy and whatever happens to him. But I was like, what if I just make a story about the villains, and like. But then I was like, I don't know. They're just gonna go fuck shit up. Sorry, F stuff up. I know your policy.
Yeah. I mean, honestly,
is there any? I'm trying to think. Like, is there a movie or a story where it's just like villains like run amok and nothing, and they're the main characters the whole time?
I mean, there's a couple, but they don't. You can view it as they don't see themselves as the villain.
Oh yeah, okay.
So Scarface comes to mind.
Yeah. Okay.
But that was why I tried to even write The Chair. But it was essentially, it's not a villain. You're not thinking that this person is. You're not supposed to think this person off the bat is someone that you should view in a negative light.
Yeah.
So and that I felt was an interesting angle for me to do, but that wasn't a story that I wanted to tell. I tell you that story messed me up for a few years, because I did a lot of research into death row phenomenon and death row inmates and people that are innocent and what the psychology is behind that, and reading a lot of interviews and watching a lot of documentaries and reading a lot of case files, just to kind of like bring some. And I had 2 different correctional officers send me emails. One of them actually met me at Baltimore Comic-Con, and he goes, this is a book that you did your research, man. And I was like, well, thank you. I did. And he's like, yeah, you did your research, because you got the psychology of these characters down for the way a lot of these guys will behave. And that it'll convince you. They'll convince you that they're innocent, that they didn't do anything. And it's kind of a lot like how Joker drives Harley Quinn insane. It's that level of it, how could they be this monster that the world thinks they are, and there's so many cases like that. And then there's so many other sad cases of people who were innocent that were literally driven friggin' insane, being put on death row in isolation for so long.
I kind of had that happen to me personally. Like I thought at the time, like I was doing good. I didn't do anything like horrible to anybody, but I'm just saying, like I had this thing, that I was like, convinced was happening. And I'm like, listen, it was 2020. And I'm like, listen, you gotta listen to me. Like, this is what's going on. And everybody's like, you're crazy, man. You're crazy. And I'm like, no, I swear to God, like, you gotta open your eyes and this and that.
It's like that moment in They Live when he's beating the crap out of him to put the glasses on,
I had sunglasses on.
And he's beating the crap out of him because he cares about him. Because he's like, listen, you jackass, like there's just crazy stuff happening. You got to put those glasses on and see what I'm talking about.
That's what I was doing in 2020. It just reminded me.
Yeah,
you gotta open your eyes. And I was like, get away from me, man. Like,
and there's people they'll fight you to the death to not, and it's like, do you care enough? Do you care enough to take those slings and arrows and then at the end of it, put them in a headlock, put the glasses on their face, and then be like, look, damn it, look,
Yeah.
And a lot of people will do that. They just don't want to see it. And the whole, it's an amazing scene, and it's somewhat hilarious. but because the fight goes on for so long.
Yeah,
But the metaphor is tremendous because we all metaphorically have dealt with people like that.
yeah.
You know,
Kind of just got to let people figure it out. Like I had people come back to me later on and were like, like, oh man, like I think you were onto something there, but like like a year later
Yeah.
or something. But it's
Yes.
nice to get some insight too, because like I never wrote like I had like some things happen to me, so like I always wanted to be a comic artist and stuff. So I'm 44 now, and I was like really young, and things happen in between, and I've had things happening recently, and I'm like I need to get started now because like no sense of wasting time. So
Oh
it's nice
yeah.
to get some insight from you about like writing and stuff because I didn't even think about any of that stuff. Like maybe what I want the characters to be, research.
Yeah, and I
into
would
it.
recommend everyone's like, how do I write a comic? Don't think about writing a comic. Think about writing a story.
Yeah.
Think about writing a story, and then you can break it down into comic format later. You want to make sure you're getting all your thoughts out. You're getting your story out because it's always about the rewriting and the revision, especially when you're getting something out and you're not necessarily used to the pacing of storytelling.
Yeah. I
So
noticed that too. Like
yeah,
I got a little bit into writing, and then I was like, oh man, I need to like add some stuff at the beginning of this. And like once you start doing it, at least that's the key. Like just start, and
absolutely.
then I
Yeah,
watch a lot of art streams, and people ask questions like, how do I get better at
yeah.
this and that?
The
What
biggest
pen are you
regret,
using? And
the biggest regrets for most people ever is I wish I got started earlier. For
yeah.
everything, no matter what.
And you're facing certain things like you can't go back. Like you realize like I can't go back in time. Like I can't get any of that time back. So you're just better just start right now as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Before you never know.
Yeah, yeah, because it's you could say that with everything. Oh, if I started doing this 5 years ago when I thought about it, I would be 5 years ahead.
I realized that too because I started drawing more regularly now, and I looked at something I did a month ago, and I was like, oh my god, it was like I'm decent. I'm a decent artist, but I was like, oh geez, like it was shaky and my lines weren't really crisp. And then like I looked at what I did like yesterday, and I was like, man, like I improved in a month. Just drawing maybe an hour or 2 hours,
Yep.
a day or like 5 times a week.
Yeah.
So it's
And
always
never compare yourself to other people. Compare yourself to you from the past,
yeah.
and that'll be a good way to get inspired.
I get caught up in that too because I was looking at I forgot whose art I was looking at, and they were doing all this crazy stuff. And I was like, I could add that into my thing, and then I just wasted time like trying to copy what they were doing. I was like, it just doesn't work for me, Like I have to just figure out my own style and everything. So
Yeah.
Like what influenced you, like your style and everything?
I think it's just a combination of everything I've ever been into.
Yeah.
Especially when I look at because that's the thing too is I can't sit here and say, oh man, I wish I created King Cryptid 10 years ago. I didn't know to create King Cryptid 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So everything will happen too for a reason at a certain point in time. You might be 20, you might be 10, you might be 40, you might be 60. Everything at a certain point in time, you're gonna accrue so much perspective and experience that's gonna lead you to that. Now, the way to get there faster is, of course, to constantly follow your instinct. We are trained day in and day out, as children to adult. Shut your instincts off. Don't follow your intuition. That's crazy. Think. Listen to your head. Don't get involved in the matters of the heart in terms of pursuing what you want to do with your life. But think about how much better the whole entire world would be if when you were a kid, whatever the hell you wanted to be when you were a kid, you were told, pursue that with every fiber of your being. Whether you wanted to be a space person, or you wanted to be a baseball player, or a firefighter, or a friggin' dinosaur. Because if you wanted to be a dinosaur when you were a kid, you would have been down the path then of being an actor or something else creative, a sculptor, an artist. You would have that would have transformed into something else to get that passion onto something else. So, but most people are told, don't do any of that. Follow the rule here. Do this, and it's about squashing those square pegs into the round hole over and over again.
I'll never forget somebody in my family was like, I showed them my drawings when I was a teenager. Like, wow, you're good. You should, but go be a garbage man. you're a good artist though, but go be a garbage man, or then
Yeah.
this and that. And I was like, what? Like, what do you mean? Like, I can't make it as an artist or something? And I did. I kind of like didn't. I stopped focusing on it. I just went to work. I just worked all the time. And then now it's like, I'm not even old, but still, like, I got things going on where I'm like really, things are being really put in perspective for me. So I'm like, I need to do things. I need to get things out now. So like, I'm glad I found you guys, like you and all the other independent creators and stuff. Because I'm like, oh man, like it's looks really hard to make a comic and put it out and everything. But I'm not saying I'm definitely gonna do it, but I'm definitely gonna at least I've started drawing again and being creative. And if I never get to make that comic, at least like I wrote something down, I started it and things like that,
Yeah.
So like, yeah, anybody watching too, like
keep it up.
Do something, even if while you're watching too, start drawing or something or writing,
Yeah, if you get hit with that, because eventually you're going to get in a situation where you can't wait for inspiration to hit you, but also at the same time you're going to be if you follow your inspiration, you're going to be so constantly inspired all the time that you're never going to, those moments where inspiration hasn't hit you, you're going to view that as like a mini little vacation. Because you're going to be so full of inspiration. The more you do things, the more you go and set out that, yeah, I'll do that. I'm inspired to do that. I'll do that right now. The more that you keep doing that and you keep living your life in that way, the more that you find that, what is this? What is boredom? What is these things that people are like, I don't know what to do with my life. I'm directionless. I'm aimless. I don't know. They're not listening to their heart. They're not listening to what they want to do. They're shutting themselves off and they're going, well, I can't do that. Everything is I can't all day long. And when you look at anybody who's ever been successful with anything ever, they all have it in common that they didn't listen to the naysayers. They wanted to do that, they did it.
Yeah.
And yeah, they're going to have days that are better than other days, but they didn't go, someone comes along and is like, oh, you can't be an artist. You can't be a musician. You can't do this. You can't do that. Do this other thing instead.
Yeah.
If every single person meets people like that at some point in time, you listen to those people, no one accomplishes anything ever.
Yeah. I find too, like once you go on that path where you're like the right path, like you get a lot of people, a lot of blockages, like or a lot of obstacles start popping up more than like if you're just lazy and laying around. Like you're just lazy laying around, and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna start drawing today, and then like the phone rings or somebody knocks on your door. I feel like I get more now that I want to do like this. Like I get more distractions now, or there's more obstacles.
Oh
like,
yeah,
try to, like get me off the path and stuff. I'm like, well, this is ironic. Like I was when I laid in bed lazy, or I was out, partying or whatever. Like I had no obstacles, nothing. And then I go home and I'm like, I want to create and stuff. It's like now there's all this stuff going on.
Yeah,
I find it pretty funny.
You gotta find a way to get back to when you were full of imagination and the world was full of endless possibilities. When we get older, we go through things, we have experiences, and what's possible narrows. And it becomes, because all of your experiences show you that that's not possible, that wasn't possible either. And eventually you become so shut off. You ever meet people that when they're adults and you're just like, I can't picture you ever being a kid, because they're just so hardened, right? And sometimes they went through a lot and it made them that way. And a lot of loss usually will do that to people too.
Yeah.
But there's some people where it's just that they're so humorless, or they're so stiff, or they're so there's something about them. They exude an energy where like you can't picture for the life of you them being a kid. They must have just been born a full grown adult with all the worries of the world.
Out wrinkly.
Yeah.
What's funny? You say that though. What part of New York did you grow up in?
I was born in Brooklyn, and then I was raised on Long Island.
Oh, okay. I don't know if you can tell I'm from New York, but I remember.
Oh yeah, totally.
But I was a bartender, right? I worked at this place one time. But it's funny you said that, because I used to see people. I had the best part of my job, right, as a bartender was I would see people like that. Like, they would sit down and a hard day of work and they would just like sit like this, and I would get to get in those people's heads and like get to know people like that. And like once you break through that, man, it was fun. Like I got good at that. Like I would look at somebody and sit down like, geez, like this person looks miserable, like.
Yeah.
And then like they'd get to know me and get to talk to me, and I'd be like, oh, this is what I'd get to actually know what happened to them, what made them like
It's a
that.
Billy
like,
Joel Piano Man.
Yo, it was nuts, man. After like one beer or two beer, like people would like they take their bars personal, man. Like, like they would. I mean, it was like especially like I was in an Irish neighborhood too, working, so like they take that like real serious. So like once I got to, I mean, and they would just be stone faced most of the time. But then once you get to know them and get to figure out their background and stuff, it's like, oh, okay, like this is what happened, and that's why I like this and everything.
Yeah.
So it was
Yeah.
like,
Everyone's got a story,
yeah,
you know,
much.
and all of our stories are, if not more similar than we think, we at least can have some understanding of what that's like, in some way, shape, or form. And if you don't, you're called a psychopath. Is basically what that is. If you literally can't have any, a psychopath is basically someone who has no empathy for another individual. So they see somebody in pain and they're just like sitting there licking their ice cream cone, like what happened? Oh yeah, I shot your arm off. Whatever, who cares? That's psychopath. Cool, calm, collected. So you get these people who can't possibly fathom what it's like to be in someone else's position. Now, when things happen to a psychopath, of course, they freak the hell out. But when it's happening to other, they're like, whatever, doesn't matter. It's not me, So most people, though, are not that way. It just so happens that there's too many people in the world with too much power who are psychopaths, but that's usually how they accrue so much power, because they're very comfortable with saying, ain't me. Who cares if that's you? Who cares if you're starving or you're going to go to war and get your limbs blown off? Who gives a crap? It's not me.
I don't know
Not my
how
kid.
people get
Not
like
me.
that. I don't know
But
how that happened.
yeah. So and if we didn't have so many psychopaths in power nowadays, I think the world would be a very different place. But that's neither here nor there. The point is that there's not a lot of them, and you meet a lot of people where you're like, yeah, I get it, and you can find that tremendous amount of humanity among people. That's why stories resonate. That's why you can read something 2,000 years ago and go, I know what that dude felt like, because we haven't changed all too much.
Isn't that missing now? Like I find, like especially with Twitter and everything, like the newer kind of creators and stuff, they don't really seem to want to destroy without empathy for the character.
Okay, so it's and we'll wrap up in a couple of minutes, but it's the same thing of character creation. For me, I'm a big proponent of the fact that characters are created through trauma, just like people are. People and individuals are all created through trauma. Things have happened to you that have shaped you. How you deal with that trauma is what makes you a hero or a villain. So if you deal with that trauma and you want to make sure, as best as you can, that people aren't put through the same pain as you, you're empathetic at that point. You don't want people to go through the horrible things that you've been through. That would be more towards the side of heroism. If you're a person who went through trauma, you've had bad experiences, and now you want to make sure everyone understands what it's like to feel that way, you're a villain. You want to make sure people feel your hurt. And that's very simplistic levels of breaking it down, but that's what that is. And it's the trauma that creates people. So when you have people out there that either have been through real or fake trauma, because there's a lot of people out there that have like Munchausen by proxy. They're out there and they're going like, oh, all this bad things that happened to all these people, it's just like it happened to me. They're twisting empathy and using it and weaponizing it by saying that I'm the victim. You ever see that? We see a lot of that nowadays, where horrible things will happen to people, and they make it about them instead of about the people who went through the horrible thing.
Yeah.
It's
I've
like
seen that
you
person,
didn't
yeah.
go, yeah. It's like you didn't go through the horrible thing. You should feel, I get you feeling bad about it and sympathizing or even empathizing, but it's not about you. It's about them. They're the one that went through it. And you'll see a lot of people, they hijack that and they weaponize empathy.
Yeah.
And they think that that's being empathetic. No, that's being narcissistic. So someone goes through something horrible and you immediately turn their loss and their pain into yours.
Yeah. I see that a lot. Like
Yeah.
I had an injury, and then everybody would come up to me and tell me their injury. They'd be like, "Oh, what happened to you? Oh, I broke my leg when I was like 12 or something." And it's like everybody has this. I don't know if it's trying to identify or something.
Yeah, and usually it's a pretty innocent thing of people
Yeah, yeah,
trying to identify and trying to commiserate.
Yeah.
Of being like, yeah, I know what that's like, and blah blah blah. But it's a different thing when someone someone sees like the broken leg, right? So you've broken your leg, and someone instead takes on the thing that happened to you and creates that as their victimhood.
Yeah.
And we see a lot of people do that based off of such and such person. My ancestors went through whatever, and it's like, okay, I get that.
Yeah.
And then your ancestors must have done that to them, so you're guilty for it. And he's like, whoa. It's a bad road to go down, because I hate to break it to you, but if we go far enough with your ancestors, we're going to find out that they weren't great either.
Yeah.
So it's one of those, like, be careful about playing the victim card through the history of people, because everyone was a bastard to everybody else at some point in time.
Yeah.
So it's more, and the more you live in the past like that, the more you can't move forward in the future. So all you're going to do is repeat the past over and over and over again.
That's true. That's a good point. Like I've apologized to people for things, and sometimes it's like, I don't even remember what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Just like living in the past. I'm like, oh my god, like I thought I did something bad to somebody, and I'm like, no, I'm really sorry for that thing. And they're like, I don't care. Like I don't even barely remember. Like the small things like that. But especially, it's just not good to. It doesn't help anybody, like trying to.
And that's also it's the difference between justice and revenge.
Yeah.
Like SJW is not the right term. It's SR. It's SR. I don't know. SRT. It's like a social revenge terrorist. It's not about justice. It's about revenge, because justice has an equal footing that plays out at the end of the day. Justice is about, especially when it turns into things that have been done, when a wrong has been committed, the wrong is righted through justice. Wrongs are never righted through revenge. Revenge has an insatiable appetite. Revenge is never full.
Yeah.
Revenge is like, you go and you do the bad thing to the person who did the bad thing to you. Do you feel better? No. The person never feels better. Usually they actually feel worse. And so if they're empathetic, they feel worse. And if they're psychopathic, they actually feel almost high off of it.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of like, and that's how you get serial killers. So it's that kind of, and then they go and try to seek out repetitive, because it's getting the repetitive high off of it. So it's not about justice, it's about revenge. And the more that the mindset is towards revenge, the more it's about living in the past. And the more you live in the past and constantly feel like the pain of individuals who've gone through something that you didn't even really go through. And even if you went through it, you didn't go through it nearly the level of the person that you're taking on the victimhood for. You're seeking out a new victim. And now you have become exactly what you hate, but you think it's through means of a virtuous nature. So there's a lot of things you can do, and to hone your craft as a storyteller, to work in this psychology. I always recommend for people to read psychological and philosophical books as well. They'll do you far more good for crafting your stories than they will for you to read like a writing book about structure and plot development and whatever. Because it's about the characters. You want to hone in on your characters, and once you develop your characters, you're going to easily be able to craft motivations for those characters, and then you have stories that start to unfold, and then you have characters that resonate and feel real. But if you don't have that psychology, if you don't have any philosophy, and you're just kind of creating everything, what happens is you create it all. They all sound like you, and they all are reflections of you. So we see a lot of that nowadays in storytelling too,
Yeah.
where these characters just kind of behave and think and
They're all the
sound
same. Like they all talk the same.
like the author.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, so you don't have this kind of breadth of perspective. You don't have diversity. So
ironic?
yeah. And the thing is that I've commented about this recently too. We don't really see so much forced diversity nowadays, as we're really seeing forced homogenization. We're seeing a forced fit in. We're seeing it a top to bottom thing. We're not seeing it from bottom up. We're not seeing people who are wronged at the bottom screaming about how they're wronged. And that's what separates a lot of the different things that are occurring now from what have been occurring before. We're seeing mandates from the top being basically told at people at the bottom, oh, we're on your side. We're on your side, though, as long as you follow what our mandate is from the top.
Yeah. Alarms go off in my head whenever everybody's like, "You got to be the same." Like everything.
Yeah. And it's because
I get like, "No, whoa, I don't even want part of that." Man.
It's because of the globalization of the world. It's about centralization. It's about globalization. So you think about every single country ever run by a dictatorship. You know, usually they're pretty big. And the reason for that being is because then you don't have the red tape of bureaucracy, right? It's my way or the highway. So but the reason that for better or worse, in different democratic republics like America, where you've had people representing different things and saying, "Oh, you can't be this, you can't do that," because our way of life isn't exactly what you're going through over there. So we can't have this clear thing pass across the board. But if you want to have a globalist kind of world, if you want to have this thing, you have to create centralization. And if you're going to have centralization, you have to create a singularity among the culture and among the way of thinking. And the way that you do that is to basically brainwash everyone into thinking that it was their idea to begin with.
Yeah, we're regulating each other for them, so they don't even have to do anything. They just put out propaganda, and everybody's like,
exactly.
Regulating each other.
So it looks under the guise of like, oh yeah, well, we're all one world, we're one people. Yeah, okay, I get it. But this isn't a utopia society where we're all one world, one people with no one ruling over us. This is a dystopia vision where we're all here and they're all there and they're telling us how to be.
How do you get
else?
How do I complain to the central government? You ever see the movie Brazil, where it's like he's just got this one paper, or he's trying to file paperwork the whole time, and he just can't get there. They keep sending them to different places. They're like, "Oh, you filled this out wrong or something," and like that's like my worst nightmare. It's like, imagine like a world government. Like, how am I going to file my paperwork with these people?
Yeah.
or you need help from them or something. Like, where are they? Who? How do you get to them? Like,
Yeah. There's tremendous amounts of damage done to human beings based off of people who had these utopian visions.
Yeah. How do they even know what we need?
Like, And it's never from. It's like difference between like the Jedi and the Sith. The Jedi with defense, the Sith with attack. So the Jedi is responsive when things have occurred. Does that mean that they're not going to prevent certain things? Possibly yes, but that also means they're not going to overstep and start to enforce things that encroach upon the freedoms of people. And with freedom, unfortunately, comes there's things that happen sometimes where. It seems like it could have been preventable, but if you think about it, the way to prevent it would have been to create a travesty among everyone, as opposed to among a certain individual or so. So you have these things play out, and they play out nowadays too. But you can incorporate all of that through your storytelling. And when things turn into a propaganda kind of story, is when you're not having events play out in a certain way, and that's how they play out within the story, but you're having events play out to basically elicit a response from the reader that is saying that, and that is the proper way to be. So you're saying that to the reader at the end of the day that this whole thing here, this whole message, this story, it's not to have you walk away from it and decide who was right, who was wrong. You learn a lesson, or you follow the characters and learn something more about the character. It's for you to basically learn about you and decide that however you are, you have to do what this thing is telling you to do. And that's basically the difference upon a lot of the propaganda. And we've seen a lot of that. We talked about even some of that tonight on the show about propaganda and storytelling within some of the comics that have been made. But it's a very weird push right now. And technology is being used in a very big way to really help with the brainwashing. I mean, I don't think we'd have the same world right now if they had this level of tech back in the 40s during World War II.
We'd be deep. We'd be practically plugged. I mean, we'd have wires coming out of us.
Yeah.
It's the worst thing for us. And it's like, it's funny, like, because these people are all about, like, how nature and the environment, and it's like their solution isn't more nature. Their solution is more technology.
You don't exactly. You don't see people preaching about planting trees and doing these other things and everything else. It's like, oh, there's so much CO2. Okay, well, if we plant more greenery, they feed off of CO2 and will emit more oxygen. So it's like, that's great. There's no downside to that.
It's more nature. That's the problem.
Instead it's like
answer is more nature, not more technology.
Exactly. Instead, it's like the push is more towards solar cells and this green energy. That we should go green and we shouldn't burn fossil fuels. But if the green energy is only green in a third of its lifespan, because it's not green creating it and it's not green when we dispose it. It's only green when it's being used. And even then when it's being used, it's still doing some kind of destructive force to the natural world. I mean, it boggles the mind, So you have all these like the climate protests. These aren't people that are like running around and then they're cleaning up the streets or a park or planting trees or doing something or helping with wildlife. They're out littering the street.
Doesn't make any
trying to empower the powerful further. So that then they'll do something about it, maybe.
I've seen solar farms. It's like on top of a field of grass or on top of a mountain, and I'm like, how is this helping anything? Like, you're covering mountains and fields with solar panels. It's like, how is that green? I don't get how people don't see through this whole thing yet. Like, it's really weird.
Even that, Sheldon, with the apartment cities. These massive 20,000 concentration towns, essentially. So you get these things that it's like, and so many people, it's like, guys, we just had this pandemic. But we need this thing where everyone is just centralized. Yeah. We've had a pandemic and we've had terrorism, right? Now, if these things were of a natural, organic nature created by people, not governments, not people in power, because notice how it was like world peace when we had the pandemic. It was just like in Marvel's Civil War, where were the villains? Where were they attacking? There's no villains.
So quiet, man.
Yeah, it's relatively quiet. No one attacking. You figure that's the time to attack your quote unquote enemies, is when they're down. So you have these mega towns and mega cities built up. That should just be like a big neon sign of like, here, come take this place out.
I started seeing that a lot in New York too. Like they started building malls, and I was like, the economy is terrible. Like, why are they building malls everywhere? But then the mall would have like houses and apartment buildings. I'm like, why do you want to live in a mall? And I knew somebody that lived in one.
Destructive for the soul. It really is.
It's like, oh, I got everything right here. But it's like, you don't have to go anywhere. And I was like, why would you want to live in a mall? Like, you just, it never made sense. And then I started putting it together, like, these people don't want you to go anywhere. They just want you to stay in this one little area.
Yeah.
And whatever. And I'm like, oh man, like,
exactly.
It's not good. But
Yep. It's about controlling resources and all of that. Because it's
from us.
Exactly. Because they're not going to live in that. Hell no.
They wouldn't. No.
They're going to live. They want the nice view and the fresh air and the nice water and the organic good food, Meanwhile, everybody else, we'll shove the GMOs down your throat and tell you it's all fine. Meanwhile, everyone's getting all kinds of everything all over the place, and you could see it.
That's what the shame is, man. Because you lived in New York. I don't know, like, how often you went upstate or whatever. Like you get out
Different
of the
world.
city, it's beautiful. There's mountains, there's farms.
Yeah, when I would visit, because I'm in New Hampshire now, and I'm not leaving, man. It's gonna have to get
Well, you
really
got
bad here.
nature.
Yeah, I feel the energy shift going as soon as I cross the Whitestone to
Oh,
get
yeah.
into the Queens. Even before that, when you're traveling through to get to that, the energy shifts.
Oh, yeah,
It is
yeah.
a
Wild.
weird, oppressive feeling. Like you feel the anxiety of millions of people.
Yeah,
And some people can feel it, and some people can't. I think eventually you get desensitized to it, but it reminds me of Ghostbusters 2. You know, it's like you get that pink. There's something happening. I don't know if it's a pink river of slime. I don't know if it's just the psychokinetic energy of everyone around, and that's creating some kind of conscious field. But you're getting something. There's a feeling that is different and not present when you're somewhere else, not in that environment.
Yeah, like I went down south to visit, and then I didn't even like I was driving on the highway. Sorry, I gotta plug my computer in, but and I could tell I was getting close to New York because the driving was just like insane. Like everybody was driving way like crazier, and I was like, oh, I must be close to. I was probably in Jersey or something. And I'm like, the driving was just way different. Everybody was changing lanes and going crazy. But then when you're down south, like everybody just kind of stays where they are.
Yeah, like if you zoom out and streets and highways are like the cardiovascular system of a human body. Going into New York is like you're squeezing into that cholesterol clogged artery.
Yeah, it's about to be a stroke.
Yeah.
Or a heart attack or something. Good thing you got out though, man. Cause it's like,
oh my lord, yeah.
It's good for you, man. I keep trying to get out, and like things keep happening. I keep having to come back. And I'm like, I at least wanted to get farther upstate. I'm in Westchester, which isn't bad, but it's getting bad, and I wanted to go upstate a little farther. But like these things, I keep getting pulled back. So
yeah, no, I hear you.
I get out of here.
I hear you, man. Oh man. Well, I gotta wrap this up, man. It was a great conversation. What's your first name, brother?
Me?
Yeah.
George.
George. Good talking to you tonight, George.
Yeah, you too. Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem at all. Have a great night, man.
You too. Thank you.
Take it easy. All right. Good conversations tonight. Man, oh man, these shows always spiral out into a bunch of things because everything's connected. Everything's connected. It's hard to stay on topic with just comics or storytelling because everything is connected. Everything impacts everything else, and you can really craft some amazing stories if you open yourself up to those perspectives. And I think we're seeing a lack of that. As much as we see conversation about diversity and everything else, we're seeing empty, hollow words. We're not seeing words of impact, words that actually mean something. We're seeing diversity treated as a superficiality. You could look just like someone else and be incredibly diverse, be very different from them. You could think just like someone else who doesn't look like you, and yet you're still diverse as well. We're not digital beings. Even if we're living in a simulated reality. I don't care. We're not digital beings. We are not exact copies of each other. We're all diverse. So that's a given. That kind of crap needs to just knock off. What we have to go is the deeper meaning of that. Back to that. Not the shallow, superficial nature of it, but what makes you different? What makes you a different human being? What have you been through? What is your perspectives? What are your experiences? And as a storyteller, if you can hit on those things, if you can craft that story that way, you'll get a really great character and you'll tell really compelling stories, and your stories will actually have automatically far more interesting elements to them than a story that is about, let me just make this character that's just like me, and and all my characters are kind of sounding the same because I don't want to create characters of different perspective and experience because it's not authentic. I don't live that life, or that's not me. So I don't want to start saying that's what this kind of. That sounds like crazy people talk. All right. If you want to be a great storyteller, create different characters. Create different characters through understanding psychology, motivations, philosophy, and incorporate that within your characters. And then you'll make a really, really interesting story, and you'll have that story resonate with people. And again, if you're a writer out there, if you're just starting out, you're a writer, you're an artist, whatever it is, exactly what I was talking about with George, start drawing. Start drawing, start writing. Don't worry about creating a comic. Just start drawing. Just start making a story. Just start writing it out. There's always time to hone in your craft, revise, edit, etc. later on. You want to make sure you get that stuff down. You get it out. Because that's the worst thing you could do, is to sit there and you're going, oh, I got to craft a comic. I don't know how to make it. So now you're not worried about drawing anymore or writing. You're worried about making a comic. Worry about making a story. Worry about making a piece of art. And just thing by thing, panel by panel, page by page. You'll get there. And like Sheldon had said before about planting a tree, the best time was 20 years ago. The next best time is right now. Same thing with everything else, because you don't want to have that regret. You don't want to have that regret years later or even today. I'm sure all of us, we have something that we're like, wish I started sooner. I think that's the number one regret for all of us about anything ever. Wish I started sooner. Sheldon, thank you so much, man. Appreciate it. It's a fun stream. Hopefully you have a few more of these solo streams. I appreciate that, man. Thank you. I'll usually have like one or two a month. And Aloe says, I feel it too. I can't go to New York City for that reason. It's oppressive. It's overwhelming. Most people that are miserable in that nature feel it, right? Most of us can feel that energy. And that's why there's so much misery in those regions. It's not to say that there's no misery outside of a region like that, or that there's no happiness. But by and large, broadly, generally speaking, yes. B, what's up? Says cool show and guests. Thanks, Pete. It's always good to get your opinion on various things. You know, especially like I said, last night was a good show with Mike, and I just kept thinking about it all last night and all day today about storytelling, about how much I absolutely love comics, but how much they've also broken my heart into 1,000 pieces several times for one reason or another. But yet here I am, and I don't know what the hell else I'd do without them, and I don't know what the hell else I'd do with my life in any other capacity than to tell stories through the medium of comic books. So in that way, you know, I feel blessed. 200 years ago, comic books not a thing. I would have been probably just making stories with pictures. So I feel like that speaks to me. That speaks to who I am, and it obviously speaks to a lot of us. The combination of word and picture is as old as humanity. Jaded One, thank you so much. Appreciate it. This is a great stream. Have a great night, everyone. And John's feeling it too. Says I feel it when I left Queens. Yeah, there's a lot of that. Spicer says, yeah, these solo streams are dope as well. Thanks for the consistency and quality of the streams and discussions. I appreciate that. And Lee says, wow, you're still on. 2 hours is huge. Yeah, we're going to end it now, though. We're going to end it now. 2.5 almost. This is one of my longer shows lately. But there was a lot to talk about, and some really great people stopping by tonight. Big thanks to those of you that called in and stopped by for a good discussion. Appreciate it. All right, everybody, take it easy. I'll be back tomorrow night at 9 o'clock Eastern with Von Klaus, and we'll be doing a Paranormal Pete stream. So I'll see what's on Von's mind. We've been talking about a couple different things that have been happening, and we'll bring that to you guys. So if you're into the paranormal stuff, we'll be talking about some of that tomorrow night. Again, 9 o'clock Eastern tomorrow night. See you then. And yeah, no problem. Thank you very much, Hidden Hand Media. Thank you, George, for stopping by. Great conversation tonight. And take it easy. Everybody, take it easy as well. See you tomorrow. Have a wonderful night. Peace.